Okay, so a bit of an early sneak peek or early look at Alhaitham for this video. We'll look at Yao Yao in a video coming in the next day or so. But for now, let's look at the main man Alhaitham. Also, before we start and get into this video, should say everything here is probably subject to change in some way, shape, or form. This is like day one information. This is day one information, and I've read through this part of like the whole thing of his skills. And some things can change here. There's some fixing they could do here and there, and I'll touch on it if I remember once I get to the skill. But yeah, not everything here is set in stone and very much subject to change. So let's get into Alhaitham. First and foremost, we should note that he has Ascension stat Dendro damage, which first and foremost can hint at him being a specific build of a main DPS Dendro character in some way, shape, or form, because he gets 28%, 0.8% Dendro damage to himself. So he's going to be some sort of Dendro damage dealer through his kit. As for Ascension materials, you can have a look at that here. A fair few things here are not farmable, like the boss material, as well as the weird rock thing, or like egg, shell, rock acorn. I'm not sure what the fuck that is, but you can't quite farm those yet. They come in the next patch with the next zone. But obviously Dendro is his rock thingy. Eremite bandanas, and then I think this is Ingenuity, the talent books. Ingenuity, I'm not quite sure. But the one with the widespread flower. That's his materials. Note them down if you want to pre-farm for him what you can. But for now, let's jump over to his skills, his attacks, and his bursts. So, before we even get into it, you're probably going to want to level up all of his kit, to be quite frank, to level 9, because you kind of use all of it in some way, shape, or form to a certain level. I'd recommend getting all of it to at least 6. If I was getting this character, probably I'd get all of it to 9 at minimum and crown one of them. The one that you're probably going to use for your specific playstyle that you like with him. But just generally speaking, his auto attack or his normal attack combo has nothing special. It's just a 5-hit combo with a charge attack, so it's pretty generic. Where it does get elevated, though, is his elemental skill. So let's just go through this slowly. He rushes forward, dealing Dendro damage to nearby opponents when the rush ends, causing a chisel light mirror to form. Holding the skill will cause it to behave differently, and what happens when you hold it is you go into an aiming mode, something like Nahida's hold, where you take a picture, but instead of taking a picture, you can just kind of adjust the direction that Alhaitham rushes forward. If you'll do that, I don't know. Genshin has an auto-target system, so you probably won't take the aim into consideration a lot, at least not in general combat. Maybe if you need to do something specific, sure, but generally you just probably tap it just to get the value out of it. But anyway, moving on to what the Chisel Light Mirror does. So when this skill is unleashed, Alhaitham will generate 1 Chisel Light Mirror, but if there are no mirrors at this time, he will generate 1 additional mirror, so to a total of 2 if you have 0 when you cast the ability. Chisel Light Mirrors will have the following properties. So, when he possesses Chisel Light Mirrors, Alhaitham's normal, charged, and plunging attacks will be converted into Dendro damage. This cannot be overridden, so it's a Dendro infusion when you cast his skill, or when you somehow obtain a Chisel Light Mirror. I say that because there's other ways to obtain them. This cannot be overridden, so if you have C6 your Bennett, you can use Alhaitham. When attacks of the aforementioned kind hit opponent, the Dendro infused attacks, that's what it's referencing there. So when those Dendro infused attacks hit opponents, the Chisel Light Mirrors will unleash a projection attack that deals AoE Dendro damage based on the number of mirrors on the field. Okay, we'll get into that in just a second. And then a total of 3 Chisel Light Mirrors can exist at once. Chisel Light Mirrors will disappear one after the other, and all of them will disappear when Alhaitham leaves the field. So what is a projection attack? The easiest way to summarize this is something like Nahida's Tri-Karma Purification. It's an attack that happens every interval, and that interval is right here. It's a static 1.6 second interval between each projection, and obviously the projections are triggered when you attack with the Dendro infusion. So to trigger the projection, you do need to have at least 1 mirror. But it also said that the AoE Dendro damage is based off of the number of mirrors on the field. What you shouldn't interpret this as 3 different hits. It's not 3 different types of hits. It's 1 different hit that scales higher and higher in damage depending on how many mirrors you have. And if we look at 3 mirrors at level 10, the damage values aren't actually bad. 96% of attack and 192.1% of elemental mastery. It's not overly terrible for something that you can do so easily by just attacking with Dendro damage when you have a mirror, but it's pretty good. And then at level 9, obviously, you can just look at this whole uh, talent board, whatever the fuck this is, like a table. That's one. It's a table. You can look at this table and see all the different damage values that you want to maybe learn. But it's a pretty good amount of damage just for casting and getting a mirror, which is quite easy. Now, we've learned here that we can get 2 mirrors. If we look here, when the skill is unleashed, he will generate 1 at least, but if there are no mirrors, he'll generate 1 additional to a total of 2. How do you get that 3rd mirror in some way, shape, or form? Well, that's where we come down to his first passive. For casual correction, when he does a charge attack or a plunge attack and it hits an opponent, you will generate 1 Chisel Light Mirror. But there is one kind of gameplay mechanic that I will encourage here, is to use his skill first, followed by his charge attack. Because, well, on his skill, you need to have 0 mirrors to get that additional 1. So you're going to have to open with his skill, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You charge forward and deal danger damage. And then you do a charge attack, and you will get that 3rd mirror. And then from then on, you can just normal attack, charge attack, whatever kind of attack you want to continue doing the projection damage that you get from having the mirrors on him. And that's actually very, very... Honestly, that gameplay already sounds very, like, enticing to me. You have to kind of min-max certain stacks. You have to use certain things in a specific order. I very much like the sound of a kind of linear but kind of complex. I say complex, I kind of quote-unquote complex, but linear but complex kind of gameplay. I really like that. Now, not a problem that I can find in his kit, but this is something that I did notice, is that the cooldown to Chisel Light Mirror removal rate is very not nice. It's not actually very forgiving. So every 4 seconds, you will lose 1 mirror, and that starts from the time that you get 1 mirror. So once you use your skill, you get 1 mirror. The timer for 1 mirror begins, and each mirror has a different timer, because it says here you will lose 1 after the other over time. So once you get 2, if you get 2 at the same time, 1 timer will start, and then you'll lose 1, and then after 4 seconds you'll lose 1, and then 4 seconds again you'll lose 1, and 4 seconds you lose the other. But the cooldown of your skill is actually 18 seconds. To lose 3 mirrors, it takes 12 seconds. So you have 6 seconds of downtime. Now, there is a solution in his constellations, and we'll talk about that once we get to the constellation section. But if we also look at getting this mirror right here, this one is on a 12-second cooldown when you're doing a charge attack or a plunging attack to get a mirror. Now, that's not really overly helpful, because it just isn't. Like, you run out of a mirror, and then adding 1 won't really do much for you. So you might as well just switch to your other characters and wait for the cooldown of his skill to finish. But regardless, that is how his elemental skill works. But there is his burst, which very much supports his elemental skill a lot. Now, his elemental burst, particular field Fetters of the Phenomena, which is quite the name, creates a particular binding field and deals multiple instances of AoE Dendro damage. Remember that word, multiple instances of AoE Dendro damage. If, now this is where it gets a bit kind of wordy, if Chisel Light Mirrors exist when this ability is unleashed, all of such mirrors will be consumed and increase the number of damage instances dealt. What does that mean? It doesn't increase the damage of your hits, but it increases how many hits there will be. So, if we just jump down really quickly, if you use the ultimate just by itself, no mirrors, no Chisel Light Mirrors, you will get 4 damage instances. If you have 1 mirror, you'll get 6. If you have 2 mirrors, you'll get 8 hits. And if you have 3 mirrors, you'll get 10 hits. So essentially, at 2 mirrors, you're doubling your damage, and at 3 mirrors, you're doing a bit more than doubling your damage, 2.5 times your damage, theoretically. It's not actually the damage, but it's the amount of hits that you are doing. But before we get into the actual values, 2 seconds after this ability is unleashed, new Chisel Light Mirrors are generated for Alhaitham based on the number of mirrors consumed. So this is where a bit of fun little back and forth gameplay can happen with this character. So, if no mirrors were consumed, 3 will be generated. If 1 is consumed, 2 will be generated. If 2 are consumed, 1 will be generated. And if 3 are consumed, none will be generated. So essentially what it says, if you use the lowest form of his burst, then you will have the uptime of his projection attack from his elemental skill, and you can go into an auto attack build with him. But if you generate mirrors and then use his ultimate to get the 10 hits out, then you're going to have no mirrors, and that's going to be where you switch out from Alhaitham. And that's kind of hinting at the 2 different playstyles with this character. You can play him as a switch in, build up mirrors, use burst, switch out character, or you can use him as a switch in, use burst, build up mirrors, and then do high sustain damage for a certain period of time, because obviously If you use his burst at 0 and do the 4 hit, you'll get 3 mirrors, and then once those 3 mirrors like leave, you can then use his skill and charge attack to get 3 mirrors back almost immediately and continue with his auto attack build, which will be quite methodical gameplay, if you will, because you'll be kind of doing a lot of fun stuff there. But obviously that's across 12 seconds plus another 12 seconds, so it's up to you if you want to spend 24 seconds on just Alhaitham. Probably not, to be quite frank with you. Anyway, cooldown of 18 seconds on his burst with an energy cost of 70, so it's not overly bad. It's nothing really terrible. It's manageable. And as for the damage on his burst, at level 10, 218% of attack plus 437% of elemental mastery per hit, not in total, but per single instance. And at level 4, at basic instance attacks of 4, when you use it dry, no mirrors, you're getting these numbers times 4 essentially. And that obviously, if you imagine that at 3 mirrors where you get 10 of that, you're like, it's pretty crazy damage that you can probably achieve if you build a decent Alhaitham. Honestly, imagining that damage is pretty fucking crazy to me. I think he'll be able to do at least 100k per instance hit, times that by 10, easily 1 million damage from Alhaitham if you build it and maybe do something like a spread build. But we'll talk about characters after we finish with the passives here. Because his second passive, because we covered the first one already, his second passive is each point of Alhaitham's elemental mastery will increase the damage dealt by his projection attack, which is his elemental skill thing, and his particular field fetters of phenomena, which is his elemental burst, by 0.1%. The maximum is 100%. To get 100%, you're going to need 1,000 elemental mastery on this character. Now, if you're actually going to get 1,000 elemental mastery on this character, I'm not quite sure, because there is a weapon specific that he has a specific weapon that isn't elemental mastery major. So I'm not sure if you actually will be getting 1,000 elemental mastery, but you will be getting at least high elemental mastery with this character, because I believe you'll probably run something like a elemental mastery chalice, a timepiece at least. And then if you have elemental mastery as a substat, you can probably get an easy 500, maybe 600 if you try. But there's that bonus there at least. And obviously, as you can tell, all of his stuff scales with attack and elemental mastery. So maybe you can even just go for full elemental mastery build and have very high damage. But the reason I say it is because his weapon is a bit different. But regardless. And then his last passive is Alhaitham crafts weapon essential material. He has a 10% chance to receive double the product. And that is great. That's amazing. Now, quickly, that's his base character. This is what you get when you just get the character. No constellations, no nothing else. This is just the character. And honestly, on paper, everything that we're seeing right now, to me, sounds fucking phenomenal. I think it all sounds great. I don't think there's any kind of fault, except for maybe the time management here. This will be rather difficult, although I welcome the difficulty, honestly. It would be kind of difficult to manage this kind of very accurately and properly. But honestly, that might get changed, but there's also a constellation to fix that. But looking at just his base game self, you can play him in 2 different ways, and it doesn't change too much with constellations, but you can play him in 2 different ways. You can play him as the Dendro Infusion main DPS through the projection attack mechanic, where you have 3 mirrors, and then you're just auto-attacking to trigger projection attacks as much as possible, and then whenever you run out of one set of them, you build them up through another set, be it you cast Elemental Burst first, get 3 mirrors, attack until the stacks ran out, which takes 12 seconds. And then you cast elemental skill, charge attack, and then attack to use up on all the mirrors, which takes a total, if to do all those instances of attacking, it takes 24 seconds. So that's a bit of a sketchy build because you're on the field with just Alhaitham for a very long time. Or you have the other type of build that you could probably do with him, which is just using his elemental burst for this massive 10 hits of damage by generating mirrors, switching into him, using skill, charge attack, casting his burst, doing 10 hits, and then switching out of him as soon as possible, because you'll do those 10 hits and then you switch out to something else. So he could be either used as a main DPS if you really try, or he can be used as a switch-in sub-DPS if you also want that. As for team compositions, you could probably run him with almost anything that like centered around Dendro. Obviously, the best one, in my honest opinion, will probably end up being Spread. A lot of people have been saying that Spread is going to be the best for him. And seeing as everything is based around him doing massive hits, Spread is probably going to be the best one, specifically comboed with his burst, I believe. If you honestly apply Spread to the enemy and then cast his burst, and all of these hits here crit, and you have a decent crit rate to crit damage ratio, as well as, high attack and elemental mastery here and there, You honestly, I would not doubt that you can get a very easy 100k per hit to a total of 1 million in 10 hits. I have no doubt that you could do that. But you could also probably do something like a Bloom build, Bloom Burgeon, Bloom Electro Charge, something like that. Maybe even Bountiful Core build with Nilo because of his high Dendro application coming from him just attacking with his auto attack. Because that's the reason Nilo's good with Nahida, or rather Nahida's good with Nilo, is because she has just Dendro as her auto attack. So Alhaitham would benefit from that as well. But those are the two builds that I kind of can see. And those are the kind of the team comps. Electro or Bloom. Pyro, probably not. Like, Burning is kind of dog shit. Like, no matter what you do with it, Burning just sucks. And even if you have like something like a C2 Nahida, Burning just stinks like all hell. They kind of scuff the element, in my honest opinion, but it is what it is. Bloom, possible. Spread, possible. Switch in DPS, possible. Main DPS, possible. It's all possible. But that's not the character in its entirety. We cover the character in Constellations as well, but that's the character at baseline. Looking at Constellations now, Constellations are a bit of a different ball game. These kind of enhance him. They don't really change anything too drastically, but they just enhance specific gameplays. So looking at his first one, when you cast his elemental skill and it hits an opponent, a special projection attack will be launched. This is separate from the projection attacks that happen in his actual skill. This is a special one just for this constellation. It deals 360% of his attack and plus 720% of his elemental mastery as AoE Dendro damage, and this can happen every 12 seconds. Obviously, his skill is on a 18-second cooldown, so you can most likely always get it off unless you have C2, but we'll get into a second. But 360 of attack plus 720 of elemental mastery, that's a lot of motherfucking damage, and it's considered elemental skill damage, so it can very easily crit. So you're looking at a metric shit ton of damage here, just on a 12-second cooldown. This is incredible to get on a C1, to be quite frank with you, just for raw damage output. No utility here, but raw damage output, this is absolutely immaculate. Moving on to C2, slightly more interesting. Projection attacks, when a projection attack hits an opponent, university, whatever, his elemental skill cooldown is decreased by 1 second. This can happen every second. So when you projection attack, when that special Dendro hit happens, that happens every 1.6 seconds, you reduce the cooldown of his skill by 1 second. Now, this is where a bit of the timing, I didn't do the calculations on kind of if you'll be able to have 100% uptime on his mirrors. I don't believe you can, but you can kind of get around almost 100% uptime on it if you really tried, I guess, because obviously you press E, you get 2 mirrors, charge attack, you get 3 mirrors, and then projection attack happens once, reduces by 1 second, it's already at 17, and then 1.6 seconds later, and so on and so forth. There's a bit of a kind of like, I'm not going to do the maths of time. I hate doing time calculations, but yeah, it's a cooldown reduction thing to smooth out his gameplay. That's the thing that I can see be changed, is either this will get buffed or his elemental skill cooldown will get nerfed a bit. One of those two things might happen. Anyway, his elemental skill is his C3. I don't really prefer having elemental skill on C3. I prefer elemental bursts to be on C3, like Eula, like is it Nahida? No. But like Eula, I prefer elemental bursts on C3, but whatever, elemental skill there. Constellation 4 is the one that enhances specific gameplays. So, let's get through this one. When his elemental burst is unleashed, the following effects will become active based on the number of chisel light mirrors consumed and created this time around. So, each mirror consumed will increase the elemental mastery of all your other party members by 30 for 15 seconds. So, if you consume mirrors to make his burst deal 10 hits, your party will be buffed with 90 elemental mastery for 15 seconds. That kind of enforces the switch him in, cast his burst, switch him out kind of playstyle. But if you generate mirrors with his burst, Alhaitham specifically will gain 10% Dendro damage bonus for 15 seconds. This one encourages the main DPS Alhaitham build, which I also find very, very nice. I do like that this constellation is both of them in one instead of just choosing one of them. This is a very great touch in my opinion. And so obviously the playstyle for the ladder will be, press his burst, switch into him, press his burst, generate those 3 mirrors, and then go into a massive damage phase. And then for those 12 seconds, you do massive damage. And then if you want to continue that damage phase by creating more mirrors with his skill and or normal attack, charge attack thing, then you can do that. Or after those 12 seconds have ended, after those mirrors have disappeared, you just switch over to your other team again and then continue from there. Those are the kind of two different playstyles, and I do absolutely love that they considered both different playstyles in one burst instead of specifying for one specific. That's C4. C5 is his elemental burst. C6 is, this one's a pretty big powerhouse one, so hear me now. If Alhaitham creates a Chisel Light Mirror when their numbers have already been maxed out, then excess Chisel Light Mirrors will increase his crit rate by 10% and crit damage by 7% for 6 seconds. If this effect is triggered again during its initial duration, the duration of the buff will increase by 6 seconds to a total of 12 seconds. That is very fucking incredible. Now, here's why. This is kind of on the power of C6 Arataki Ito, but essentially here's the gameplay. And this C6 encourages main DPS Alhaitham. It encourages the projection attack version of Alhaitham, which is, I've got no problems with that. That's very fun. And so essentially the gameplay loop here would be switch after you cast your team's buffs, switch into him, cast his burst, get 3 mirrors, and then cast his skill to then immediately get the crit rate, crit damage buff, and then also at the same time charge attack immediately to get the extension on this crit rate and crit damage buff to 12 seconds, and thus you now have 12 seconds of absolute juicer damage. It's absolutely incredible damage. You're going to have 10% increased crit rate, consistency increase, and also 70% crit damage, which, let me tell you now, your crit damage is probably going to be at an average of 200% with this fucking character if you build him correctly. And then with that 70% bonus, you're probably going to go up to 270, 300 if you actually tried. So it's fucking incredible damage, in my opinion, from C6. But obviously you have to be careful with, like, you have to wait for the timing to happen after his burst. You have to wait 2 seconds to actually get the mirrors and then cast the things correctly. It's not just going to be an instant thing. You're going to have to have a bit of patience and whatnot. So that's his constellations. Now, when we do these, I like to recommend constellation like checkpoints and what's the best constellation to get for the amount of investment that you have to do. And to be quite frank with you, it probably ends at C1. His C1 is actually a lot of power, in my opinion, for just being C1. C2 doesn't really do anything, and C3, it boosts his normal attack, sorry, not his normal attack damage, but his elemental skill damage and his projection damage. So, you know, if you want consistency in that, yeah, and if you kind of want consistency, C1, 2, and 3 kind of do that for his elemental skill build. But in my opinion, the raw damage that you can get from C1 is very high compared to investing for more things. So C1 is probably the first checkpoint. Then the third checkpoint, or second checkpoint, sorry, will be C4, and then C6 will be the last checkpoint. So that's kind of it. To be quite frank, C2 is not incredible until it gets buffed potentially, and then C3 is, I don't know, it just doesn't sound right. It just doesn't sound right. I'm getting some off feelings from C3, but those are the checkpoints I'd recommend. But then again, on just in C0, he's fucking incredible, at least for me. It sounds like you can do a lot of variety builds with him, and kind of even just himself playstyle wise can be pretty varied. And I think that's everything to do with Alhaitham. Just one other thing is his weapon, his signature weapon. Alhaitham, obviously, he Artman. Just let me check if I missed anything. I don't believe I did. Yep, we didn't miss anything. His signature weapon is the Light of Falaya Sanction. Base attack 542 with 88. I can't even say the number. 88.2% crit damage. So low base attack, high crit damage. Crit rate is increased by 8% on the ability, so you just get a flat 8% crit rate, which is going to boost his consistency by a lot. Then, when normal attacks deal elemental damage, specifically there, when normal attacks deal elemental damage, the Falaya Sanction effect will be obtained, increasing damage dealt by normal attacks and elemental skills by 120% of elemental mastery. This effect will disappear after 16 instances or 12 seconds. You can obtain the Falaya Sanction once every 12 seconds. So this is very reminiscent of what's his face's Tignari's bow. Obviously, they share the same design. If I can find a picture of it, I can't. There's no picture of it. My apologies. But yeah, obviously it shares the same design, and so it's going to have some similar effects. It's going to be his best weapon, to be quite frank with you. But this is easily probably like transmutable into the Mistsplitter Reforged. But for Alhaitham, this one's probably going to be the best one. But this weapon is also going to be good on other characters, mainly Ayaka, Ayato. It's just a great weapon all around. Ayato specifically as well, because when normal attacks deal damage, you get the effect, and then normal attack damage is increased, and Ayato normal attack, so you can also do that there, but we're talking about Alhaitham here. And so this is going to be his best option, but Alhaitham can also benefit from all those other weapons as well. He can probably benefit from, you know, the Haran Gibakufutsu, which is Ayato's main weapon, the Missplitter Reforged, the Jade Cutter, all these 5-star weapons he can very much benefit from. And if we have a look at the other list, I have no doubt that he could benefit from the Summit Shaper, not the Freedom Sworn, but maybe if you want to do a full Elemental Mastery build, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. All the 5-star weapons are probably okay, except the Kajni Soot, to be quite frank with you. It's just a HP weapon, he doesn't scale with HP. As for 4 stars, now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't think about it. But, you know, Festering Desire, if you have it, probably could work. Sacrificial Sword, if you kind of want to use him as the switch in, switch out kind of character. Xiphos Moonlight, I don't even know what this is. Probably not. But probably 2 as well. 4-star weapons are kind of, I've forgotten that these things exist because I only use 5 stars. But any attack percent weapon, any crit rate weapon, or any crit damage weapon, and potentially, depending on the ability of the Elemental Mastery weapon, you could probably just slap them on and hope for the best. Iron Sting wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, because dealing elemental damage increases all damage by 6. At a refinement 5 of 12, you can get 2 stacks, 24%. So even that's not terrible if you want to go for an Elemental Mastery build. But in the end, Light of the Falia Sanction is going to be his best, with a few others from the 5-star category. And that's for 4 stars. Listen, at this point, just invest in a 5-star weapon, dude. Just invest in a 5-star weapon. And I think that's everything for Alhaitham, the main man, the big man. Hopefully this was helpful. Again, take everything that was said in this video with a grain of motherfucking salt. There are a lot of things that can be subject to change. A lot of things can happen in the coming 6 weeks, by the way. There's still 6 weeks until his launch, so there's a lot of shit that can happen, a lot of betas that can happen. So again, a lot of stuff can change. But then again, also discuss in the comments what you guys think of this. Do you think he'll be a good main DPS, shit main DPS? Is he going to be better than this guy? Is he going to be better than that guy? What role do you think he's going to do? Are you just going to get him because he's an attractive man? Are you just going to get him because he has a nice back? He's showing arms. He's a muscular man. What are you going to get him for? And if you are going to roll on him, tell me how many rolls have you saved up as well, because it's going to be fun to see who gets him depending on the amount of rolls you've invested. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, and join the crew channel, whatever the hell you want to call it. Discord link is in the description, I believe. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. That is going to be Yao Yao, I believe, tomorrow or the day after. I have no clue, but soon.